if you have a gratitude journal and you write down every day the 3 things that you're grateful for, it is shown to have a positive benefit to your daily life, because you're starting with the positive filter, what's good going on around me. However, when you add the vulnerability component of expressing that gratitude outwardly, the effect of that gratitude and joy you feel is like 10x what it is if you keep it to yourself. C.S. Lewis has a great quote. He says, "Joy is incomplete until it is shared with another."
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich show. This episode is a really fantastic one. I know we say that a lot, but this is John Israel, and you might be familiar with John Israel with his Mr. Thank You project. And John gets into a really cool story about how, imagine having the head coach from Gonzaga reach out to you. So listeners, stay tuned on when you listen to this episode. How do you get the head coach of Gonzaga to reach out to you and thank you for something? I think that was really cool. I mean, John is his Mr. Thank You story has been featured on ABC News, Fox News, Good Morning America. I mean, he has global clients, different brands from Square to Salesforce. So many others have been influenced by John. He's out in Plano, Texas, and he has 4 children at home. He is the embodiment of what it means to demonstrate gratitude for life, and gets into practical and tactical tools that you could take away with you. Andrew, what were a couple of things that showed up for you in this episode?
Well, I love John's willingness to go all the way. He actually, for a year straight, wrote 5 thank you cards, handwritten, personalized thank you cards to different people. And that was the start of this Mr. Thank You project. He gets into that. He gets into some of the challenges around that. And then he gets into just how important gratitude is in our lives. And if you're like me, it can be very easy to take things for granted. And so this is just an amazing reminder to always focus on gratitude. I know you're going to love this episode, and you're going to leave inspired at the end. So thank you, everyone. And let's dive in with the show with John Israel.
Back to the Better Than Rich show. I'm Mike Abramowitz. I'm here with Andrew Biggs, and we have been trying to get this guest on our show for quite some time. We are finally here with the Mr. Thank You project himself. If you're watching us on YouTube, you could see this beautiful face and this awesome book by John Israel. Welcome to the Better Than Rich show, brother.
Mike, thanks for having me, man. I know this was a long time coming. I appreciate your patience. We were in a very busy season as we first talked, so I'm excited to finally be with you and all your listeners.
Well, we're really grateful, and I will say first and foremost, number one, fantastic book. And what made me want to read the book, believe it or not, I don't even know if you know this or not, was when I got a random letter in the mail with a PB&J, a peanut butter and jelly on the cover of the card. And you said, I saw this card and I thought of you, and you wrote a really beautiful message. Mm-hmm. And it sounds terrible, but I was literally just going through my box trying to find it, because I save every card, and I was sifting through, and I was like, how cool would that be if I could just go find this card? And unfortunately, it sounds like a braggadocious thing that I just have so many thank you cards that I've saved over the years. But I remember the sentiment. I truly appreciated it. And I love what you do and everything you've done, the stories behind giving the letters to the airline, the pilot, and just so many cool stories I heard about the Thank You Project. So thank you so much for being here and bringing value to our listeners. So Andrew, let me kind of kick it to you, bring your voice into the space.
Well, I mean, honestly, I've been, privy to a little bit of the journey with you too, John, and just like your experience. So I would love for you to fill the listeners in on what we know, but how did this whole thing get started? What is the Mr. Thank You Project? Yeah. Because it's been really impactful from what I've seen, but I know there's people out there who still haven't heard of it. So fill them in if they are unfamiliar with the Mr. Thank You Project.
For sure. So the Mr. Thank You Project is a mission to elevate the level of gratitude and connection on the planet by inspiring 74 million thank you projects around the world. Now, that has some questions, right? Like why, where, why is that number specific? So, it all began because for me, in 2016, I was in a really unique stage of life where I actually was running a business that was very successful at the time. We were, I was making more money than I ever had. Virtually everything I said I wanted in my life, I had achieved, which was I was married. We bought our first house. We had just had our first child, but I was over it. I was burnt out, disconnected, and just really unhappy. And I remember coming home one day, and it was a really interesting visual because my wife was sitting on our couch nursing our infant son in one arm and handwriting thank you cards in the other hand to the people who had been supporting her during her pregnancy. And I come in and I do what I normally do at the end of my workday, which is complain about my day, right? So everything that went wrong, the traffic, the weather, all that stuff. And I did this every day. And this one particular day, she interrupts me and she says something that I'll never forget. She says, "Sweetheart, if you can't appreciate what we have now, who's to say you'll be any happier when you finally get what you say you want?" And she was right, because I had everything I said I wanted, but I still wasn't happy. And I still had these big goals, these achievements, these accomplishments that I wanted to take off the to-do list. But if truly, it's a great question. If you can't appreciate what you have now, if you can't do that, who's to say it'll be any different later on? And so she identified a problem that I had that I didn't know I had, which is perpetual discontentment. Perpetual discontentment, which is the never-ending experience that what is isn't enough. And, Andrew and Mike, I know both of you guys, your businesses, your companies work with this person who has this problem, because ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur, you're in business, it's not necessarily a bad problem. Because if you're never fully contented with what you have, you're always going to try to make things better. And that's going to help you make more money and serve more people and help your clients have a better experience. But what's the other side of that is we're never happy. We're never fully satisfied with what we create, and we don't allow ourselves to experience joy. So for me, I thought, okay, well, this brought up two really big fears for me, which I don't know if you guys share either of these. Number one is that I would make it to the end of my life and never truly be happy. Like that would be terrible. The second one is that I would die alone, because who wants to be around somebody who is complaining all the time? So I had a coach that I work with, and Andrew, that's kind of where our stories connected back in a previous coaching organization. And, we were really focused on your vision and your mission, like what are your values, what do you care about, and really living those values out. And so, our business is all about gratitude. So I run a strategic gifting company, and we help people say thank you for a living. And so I was this gratitude salesman who embodied zero gratitude. So we thought, how can we do that? How can we find a way to really live this value of gratitude publicly? And so I started this idea of, well, what if I made a commitment around writing thank you cards every day for a year? And, I'll summarize it, but what became known as the Mr. Thank You Project started with me. And I made a commitment to handwrite 5 thank you cards every day for 365 consecutive days. Every card had to be handwritten, couldn't be a text. Every day reset at 0, so I couldn't skip a couple days and then do 20 in a day. I could write a max of 3 cards per any one person, so I couldn't write 75 to my mother, although she might have appreciated that. And the final rule was I would donate $1,000 to charity for any and every day that I missed writing my 5 cards. So when you do the math on that, 365 days times 5 cards is 1,825 letters of appreciation in 1 year's time. Now, I don't care who you are. If you spend a year of your life expressing love, gratitude, and appreciation every single day, 5 times a day, you would be a different person by the end of that year. And that's essentially what happened. It changed my life. It transformed my business, my marriage, and life is so much different because of this project. And that's kind of also what brought us here today. So there's a lot more, obviously, that happened after the fact of that. But that was really the beginning and the genesis of the Mr. Thank You project.
I definitely love everything you just shared. And there's a couple of curiosities that I have, from the book and also from what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you right, if I feel a little bit stuck in my old patterns or my limiting beliefs or my old bullshit story, an interruption of the pattern is give gratitude to 5 other humans, right? And put it into writing and drop it to them. And the law of reciprocity is going to then bring me some sort of joy or some sort of gratitude by me giving the gratitude to these other people. Is that the simple habit? Is there like another practice that I'm missing? Is there more to this joy, the practice of joy, that it needs to come through? Or is it simple induced reciprocity by simply the act of writing and giving gratitude?
Yeah, it's a great question. So and this is a great place to distinguish two things, which is happiness and gratitude. Okay, happiness is very distinct from gratitude because you don't need to teach a child how to be happy, but you do need to teach them how to be grateful, because you can naturally do something that makes you feel good and you feel happiness. Gratitude is a reflective state where you have to stop what you're doing, look at something, and apply positive meaning. So this is a great place to bring in a definition. The definition of gratitude by Dr. Robert Emmons of UC Davis. He's a foremost researcher on this topic. He says gratitude is the emotion one feels when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. And we might use that definition multiple times throughout this podcast, because what is there is the experience of, yes, if somebody surprises you with a gift you didn't expect, you did nothing to deserve, that emotion you feel is gratitude. The other part of this is the view of something that it is a gift in my life. This is a good thing. So when we look at this, what I love about gratitude distinct from happiness in teaching entrepreneurs and business people this concept is that it actually is a tool of state change. Because when it's like, hey, do something that makes you happy, it's like, okay, I'll go on a walk, or I have to go do something, right, to make me happy. Gratitude, you don't have to do anything. You simply look at everything that already exists and you ask yourself this question: where's the value? Where's the good? Where is the lesson? And when you have the ability to answer that question, you can convert any life experience into something that makes you feel good, that you feel gratitude around. And there's a lot we can go into, if it's relevant, of how, it's so powerful to apply gratitude to painful or challenging experiences. But I think on the simplest form, Mike, people who are listening to this podcast, you probably already have good things going for you in your life. But how often do you take the time to sit and just enjoy what you have? And I think the different part, and this is actually a distinction I'll make, and then we can move on to what you guys want to talk about next, is I think what was actually inadvertently so powerful about writing the cards is because if you have a gratitude journal, this is actually research in positive psychology. If you have a gratitude journal and you write down every day the 3 things that you're grateful for, it is shown to have a positive benefit to your daily life, because you're starting with the positive filter, what's good going on around me. However, when you add the vulnerability component of expressing that gratitude outwardly, the effect of that gratitude and joy you feel is like 10x what it is if you keep it to yourself. C.S. Lewis has a great quote. He says, "Joy is incomplete until it is shared with another." So when you think about this concept of, yes, I have this gratitude over here, I keep to myself, but when I publicly state it, it literally has to come out in my body, in the words that I write, in what I say. And I'll give you one research study with this, which is they had people do something called a gratitude visit, where they would write a letter of gratitude to somebody that they care about. And instead of just mailing the letter, they recommend schedule a visit to see this person and then read your letter out loud to them face to face. And here's what I can tell you guys, it is super uncomfortable. It is very vulnerable. I had a coach that I worked with for years, and I took him out to lunch one day. It took me the whole lunch to build the courage up to just be like, I wrote a letter to you. Can I read it? And it was palpable. Both of us started tearing up, just joy, connection. And I didn't feel that when I thought those things about him. I didn't respond that way when I wrote the letter. I responded and reacted that way when I expressed it, which is why I think that it's not easy to do what I did or to live your gratitude out loud. But it is such a powerful and fast, effective tool to experience more joy.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the willingness, John, for you to live out your gratitude, right? And one of the practices that we have at the Biggs household is every night before Eli goes to bed, I ask him, "Hey, what are your gratefuls?" And that just means, "Hey, what are 3 things you're grateful for?" And then I share my 3, and he shares his 3. But to your point, the act of like going and telling somebody, right? The act of sending a letter, how much more, right, gratitude are you really going to feel? And what you said about you don't have to teach a child to be happy, but you have to teach them how to be grateful. I can definitely attest to that, being a father. And at times it feels like, I think it's just human nature, right? It seems like we're hardwired to find the negative, to find what's wrong, right? To complain, to think that nothing's ever good enough. And so, I see that every day with my son, and I see that every day with myself, right? And so it's a constant battle. I'm curious from your side, a listener, I really want to make sure you understand 5 thank you cards a day, every day for a year. Like that could not have been easy, John. So I'm curious, in that journey, was it difficult? Were there times where you were like, fuck this, I don't want to say, great, I'm not grateful for anything today or whatever, or you had a hard time, finding something to be grateful for? And I guess maybe an added little caveat is like, yeah, what about the really tough things too? Because maybe sometimes you hear somebody ask a really tough question of, well, what am I supposed to be grateful for? I just lost my job, or I just had a death in the family, or I have a big health concern that just came up. Like, how do you find gratitude in those things? So, take that wherever you'd like, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey and how you cope with some of those harder questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. The best question that I was forced to answer this whole year-long project was, how do you be grateful when you don't feel like it? That's a really hard question. And here it was, I'll give 2 examples. One, I remember just out in the field one day, I was meeting clients, and it was just a terrible day. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna chalk this up as a loss for the day. No big deal. I'm just gonna go home early, and I'm gonna write my thank you cards, because again, I have to do this every day before I go to bed. So I come home early, and when I do that, I put the key in the door. And we have a Chihuahua. So he starts barking because dogs bark at the door. Our dog barked at the door. Well, what I didn't realize is my 2-year-old at the time had just fallen asleep on the couch. So then he gets woken up and he starts screaming because the dog's barking. And then my wife is holding our infant son at that time, who had just fallen asleep, and he starts screaming. So now I've got a barking Chihuahua, 2 screaming children, and my wife looking at me with laser beams coming out of her eyes, like, why are you home 30 minutes early? And I come in and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go up to my room and write some thank you cards, right? Like, that was the last thing I wanted to do. And here's the interesting fact. I couldn't do it because I really wanted these cards to be good and authentic. I didn't want them to be fake gratitude. I really wanted to mean what I said. Guys, I could not harness an ounce of gratitude in that moment. And I had just been getting into the research and studying of mindfulness and meditation. And the only thing I could think to do at that time was I turned off the lights, I laid on the ground, and I processed the day. And the visual that I give for people about what that was like in that moment, it was like if you ever had a snow globe and you shake it up and everything's flying around and you can't see the picture or the item that's in the middle of the snow globe. That's kind of what it's like in a highly stressed, highly emotional day. And so what eventually happens is if you let the snow globe sit, all those things start to settle to the bottom and you can see clearly. Now, we don't normally let ourselves do that because what happens is we're so busy, and then we get frantic and crazy and emotional, but then we just keep working and we keep shaking that snow globe over and over, never letting those emotions settle to the bottom. And this was a fascinating fact that I learned during this project, is that the average human emotion lasts 90 seconds in the body when allowed to completely process. I'll say that again because I think that's such a powerful point if you understand how it works. The average emotion lasts 90 seconds in the body when allowed to completely process. So what that experience was for me, and I was only laying on the ground for a few minutes, was all of that dust, all of those thoughts, all of those fears, all of those concerns that I had throughout the day just settled to the bottom. I stood up, I grabbed my journal, I made a few notes. I wrote down what I was worried about. I'm worried that I ruined my wife's life. Is that true? No, I didn't ruin her life. Will she forgive me? Yes. Okay. I had a terrible day at work today. Does that mean my business is going to close? No. Do people have bad days once in a while? Yes. Could I have a great day tomorrow? Absolutely. Cool. And then it was just, I went straight to the cards and I wrote each one faster than the next. And it was so fascinating because literally 10 minutes before this, I could not harness an ounce of gratitude to write a thank you card. But with this simple process of slowing down, letting everything settle to the bottom, journaling my thoughts a little bit, I could get into a grateful state, and it was a great day. So that's a great example of how, applying gratitude to a challenging day, a way to do that, because it wasn't even, well, let's just dump gratitude on a crappy day, because it didn't work. I think the one of the most powerful things I had to learn was how to deal with my negative emotions so that I could find access to gratitude. Because if you just shove gratitude on top of negativity, it's like whipped cream on a turd pie. Like, it's just not going to taste good. It's not going to work. It's not going to be authentic. And so you've got to allow yourself to process it. So that's the first story. I'll stop before I say the second one. But any thoughts or comments on that?
I love that, by the way. And I'm really glad you went there with the journaling, because what my mind went to immediately is, if I'm not feeling in a grateful state, but I got to get this done, it ends up feeling like work. And it's like, is it really a gratitude project as much as is like, I just got to fulfill my obligation that I made to myself? So I really appreciate you honoring that and saying, there was times I just didn't feel like it. And this was my process of what I did. I laid on the floor, practiced stillness, got from my head into my heart, grabbed my pen, journaled from my logical part of my brain, brought it to my emotional part of the brain, or vice versa, brought the emotion to the logic, wrote it down, got myself into a different, interrupted the pattern, and then got into this grateful state to then begin to write these cards. Because here's one of the things that immediately showed up for me is part of your book, you talked about delegation of gratitude, and doing these cards too. And in that moment when I'm feeling like, oh, I don't feel like doing this shit, couldn't you have like just delegated it and been like, hey, I need you to go write 5 of these for me, or go to like one of these postables or one of these like websites, Be like, hey, create 5 gratitude cards for me, so you could check the box on something like that. Go to Chat GPT or something. Hey, write a gratitude letter to the pilot for me. I love, obviously you could speak to that if you'd like, but that's where my mind went. If I wasn't feeling it, I could have just done that. But you gave the listener an actual practical strategy of what you could do. I also really just want to click on this. When you said if your wife was mad at you, I loved your story about how you gave your wife a vacuum. I don't know if if our listeners, if you, my wife really loved that story too. So if you don't follow John Israel, many of our listeners follow your work, but if you don't follow John's work, you should go back and check out his story about how to properly give your wife a vacuum. It's really a fantastic story. But those are my reflections. Because when you said, "Is my wife mad at me?" It's like, not after you gave her a vacuum the way you did, man. She can't be mad at you for that long. That's pretty good. But anyway,
Mike, we have to tell the story now because now everyone's going to be confused. Why would
we
John
could close the loop at the end of the episode.
Sure.
If you want to tell the story, that would be good. So I know you said
Fair
you
enough.
have a second story queued up, but those are my reflections from your rant on the first story, though.
I love that. Great. Well, let me give you the second example here because it was a little bit deeper in the scope of the impact of what it had long term for me, which was I'm a graduate of Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. So a very small school. They have a really good basketball team for anyone who watches NCAA basketball. And during the Mr. Thank You project, during that year, our school had made it to the national NCAA championship, which was a huge deal. Never had happened in school history. And so I'm watching it with my family, like my kids have their jerseys on and we're all pumped and we lose. And it was an ugly game. There were so many things that went wrong, but it was just like, ugh. And I'm not a big sports guy, but I do watch, Super Bowls and things like that. And you see the losing team like downtown getting devastated, people flipping over cars and lighting trash cans on fire. And I never understood it until that day because I was so viscerally hurt, saddened, depressed. It was not good. It was 9:00 at night. My wife was like, all right, I'll put the kids to bed because I still had to write my cards. And again, similar state, I could not harness an ounce of gratitude. I knew as soon as I went into my office the next day or saw any of my friends or clients, sorry about your team, buddy. And then I'm going to relive it over again and be like, don't talk to me about it, right? Isn't that commonly what happens when we have an experience like that? Well, so again, I needed to write these cards or I had to pay $1,000 to a charity. And so I had to figure this out. And again, I'm just going to pull back to the definition from Dr. Robert Emmons, which is gratitude is the emotion one feels when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. And I want to apply that in a practical way here. It's like if you ever imagine having been in a relationship early in your life, like your first boyfriend or girlfriend, and it ended and it didn't end well. How did you feel in that moment? Were you grateful? Probably not. You were upset, angry, felt betrayed, whatever it was. And then ultimately, with time and perspective, you can look back on that experience and say, well, I'm glad that happened. Because that happened, I learned all these things that I needed to learn. Or because that happened, I actually met this person over here who was way better for me that actually started my family with. So you can actually look back on past negative experiences and feel gratitude. So the question becomes, how long does it take you to feel gratitude from a painful experience? And the answer is as long as it takes you to find the gift. So in that moment, I just started asking myself, where's the gift? Where's the good? Where's the value? Where's the gift? Where's the good? Where's the value? And it was like a light bulb went off. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't just watch my team lose the national championship. I just watched arguably the best team in my school's history. Like, this deserves to be celebrated. And so I thought, I'm going to write a handwritten card to every single member of the Gonzaga men's basketball team and the entire coaching staff. So I went online, ncaa.com. I'm looking up every player's name. I'm looking up every game they had, all of their scores. I'm looking up their best games when they were in the newspaper and all that. And I'm making every letter over that entire week because there's like a lot of people. So it was like a whole week project to do this. But here was the crazy thing, guys. The moment I made that connection that I didn't watch my team lose the national championship, I just watched the best team in my school's history perform, I felt joy. And when I started expressing that in every letter, it just got anchored deeper and deeper and deeper. And it didn't matter. Like the next day, people were like, oh, sorry about your team. I'm like, whatever, man. It was a great season. And I truly meant it. So that was so powerful because then I started to look, where in my life have things happened to me or happened in my life or to people around me that I say that was not a good thing. That should have never happened. I looked at experiences, I had experienced sexual abuse as a young person. and being able to look and say, where is the gift in this experience? Where is the good? And it was really powerful. And I don't know if you know the story, Andrew, because this came out during our coaching group. But one of the things that I learned to do was to write letters to myself, that were experienced pain and experienced challenges, and bringing wisdom and love from the older version of myself to this younger self. And I wrote that letter to myself when that abuse happened to me. And it was really interesting. It wasn't a profound thing, but it was like this really softness occurred. And I remember the moment I was at an event and I talked to a woman who had actually experienced some sexual abuse, and I shared with her my story of what I did. And she's like, I can't believe that. That is I'm going to do that. And when I got to see my overcoming of that experience for myself, that shame or guilt or whatever I felt, to getting to share how I overcame it with this other woman, and then she chose to do the same thing, I got to see the value of the hardest thing that I'd ever gone through. So I say this because a lot of your listeners have been through challenges where it's like losing of a business partner, a divorce, a breakdown in their business, something terrible, quote unquote, happen. And you actually won't let yourself engage in things like that again because you're afraid of being hurt. But if you can actually allow yourself to look at an experience and ask yourself, where is the good? Where is the value? Where is the lesson? That can change your life. So that's probably the most profound thing that I got. Here's a little bonus to that. 2 months after that, I write all these cards to the Gonzaga men's basketball team. I forget I even do it. I'm just like moving because I have to keep writing 5 cards every day. On May 21st, my birthday, I go out to dinner with my wife, and she pulls a letter out of her purse and says, oh, by the way, this came in the mail for you today. And it was addressed from Gonzaga men's basketball. And I open it up, and it is a letter from Mark Few, the head coach of Gonzaga men's basketball. This dude makes millions of dollars, Nike sponsorships, one of the biggest dudes in the game. And he writes me, a fan, a handwritten card thanking me for every letter I sent to the team, thanking me for being an alumni and the support that I offered, and thanking me for showing up for the team during a really challenging time.
Wow.
And so when I think about, like, I couldn't have planned that. I couldn't have paid him to do that. He chose to. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about gratitude is it speeds up connection faster than anything else. So, like I said, there's a lot to unpack about that, but those are, 2 of the most profound experiences that came out of the whole project.
Yeah. Well, thanks for going there, man. And I mean, such great stories. And that's what I love whenever we connect. I mean, I don't know if you remember, we were in Nashville at a conference and we went out to dinner, and you told me that story about writing a letter to yourself. And I don't know if you remember this wrinkle, but you told me that you, if I understand it correctly, you read it out loud to yourself and imagined you were speaking
Correct.
to yourself at that time, right? As a younger version of you. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll clarify that. So this was and I didn't realize this later, but this is actually a therapeutic process. It's called letter therapy, of all things. And you write a letter to a version of yourself that is in a dark or difficult time. And you come bringing love and wisdom, because in that moment, you had a lot of meaning you were applying to what happened. Well, hey, this happened to me, so this means I'm this, or this means that this is true, or this is what people are like, and you make meaning about an experience. But it's not really true, but that's what you believe at the time. So coming from wisdom and love, looking at it, be like, well, hey, here's what I know you think this means, but it doesn't. Here's what it actually means. Here's what's going to happen to you in the future. And so this was the exercise. And I will give credit to Michael Brabant, because he is the one who told me about this. He was a meditation teacher, is still. And he said, sit in one chair as your adult self, reading the letter to another chair. Now, go sit in the other chair and embody the posture of the version of yourself that just went through what you went through. Like your body, everything about it. and then go back to the chair of the wise version of yourself and read the letter with full compassion and love to yourself. And then when you're done, go back to the chair of that younger version of yourself and receive that love and wisdom. Bro, it was unreal. I did this because I actually thought this was an interesting idea. So I wrote several letters to myself, and I did like 3 in a row. I had to stop because I was literally like sweating. I had to go lay down because there was so much emotion that I was processing. But what I can tell you, like, I mean, I acknowledged like periods of like major business failures, friendships that fell apart, just times when I thought I was a total failure in life. And it was so interesting because what I noticed, and this was the powerful thing, especially if you're a business person, maybe this is a great example. I know you guys work a lot with virtual assistants or hiring team and support staff. I did not hire a support team member for years because I was afraid of being taken advantage of. Why? Because I've been taken advantage of before. And so I could never allow myself to trust that. Now, when I allowed myself to process that pain, that fear, and realize that that's a possibility, but there's also so many more great things that can happen if you hire a staff member. Because I could process that experience with wisdom, I was able to now feel confident to step forward and try it again. Because how many things do we not want to do because we're afraid of what happened the last time we tried it? And unfortunately, that stops a lot of people from doing amazing things that really their greatest gifts live in. This is a side note, Andrew. I don't know if you know this, but my first paid speaking engagement, because I do a lot of keynote speaking now. My first paid speaking engagement was when I was 24 years old. It was a high school orientation in an inner city school in where I lived. And I was all motivated and excited. I'm like, oh, I'm going to crush this talk. Bro, it was so bad. Like so bad. Imagine 800 people simultaneously having a conversation with each other, and then somebody in the front of the room trying to give the best motivational speech of their life, and nobody listened to you. That is what it was like for 60 minutes. And I remember finishing that experience and feeling like that was the worst thing I've ever been through. It took me 10 years to harness the courage again to ask somebody to pay me to speak. Now I get paid lots of money to go speak to organizations, companies all across the country because I had to deal with that. But it's so unfortunate because where some of your greatest pain exists is also the greatest opportunity to do what you've really wanted to do. And most of us, we just get too afraid because what if we get hurt again? But I think we have to allow ourselves to be willing to get hurt to live a really big life.
Jeez. I just have to jump in because I relate to a lot of what you just shared. I may have shared it on past episodes for the listeners, but the first one with the speaking, I definitely realized, my first paid speaking gig, I reflected on that. But when you said 60 minutes, I was like, shit, I wish it was 60 minutes. Mine was 3 hours. 3 hours. I got to the point where I just had kids do trust falls on the stage because I ran out of content. I ran out of shit. No one was paying attention. I whipped out $50 out of my wallet. It was like $50 to someone who wants to live their dream today. And I had one of the kids do stand-up comedy on the stage, and like no one really cared. Like it was just fucking terrible. Countryside High School, my first speaking gig. So shout out to them. But I wanted to just double click on what you said about the note to yourself, because this is something that was so practical for me. And it was actually fairly recent when we were in the hospital with our son. We were running the retreat in Orlando. Andrew and I were facilitating it for Better Than Rich and this was 2021. I wasn't like a partner of Better Than Rich, but I was on the support staff, and we were writing a letter to ourselves. And I was writing a letter as me to, at that point, to my 20-year-old self, and the 20-year-old self going through and navigating the death of my mom and going through that whole situation of uncertainty and bringing in the lessons that I learned from 20-year-old Mike to 36-year-old Mike, and just seeing just the connection that I was able to have between the two versions of me in that note. And I've read that letter to myself several times. And it was just so helpful for me to get through such a season of uncertainty, because we were in the hospital for 8.5 months. So he was born New Year's Eve. That was in March. So we had no idea what was going to unfold. So month 3 was just so much uncertainty. And then, that was such a pivotal part of me being able to like figure out what my next moves were going to be with, everything. So I just wanted to say that was super helpful, practical tool for me. And I'm glad you brought that to our audience. And if you're, listener, I highly recommend you find a traumatic part of your life that you overcame, or you at least moved through, and see what you got from that experience by just writing that note with the wisdom that you have today. So that's really great. I wanted to kind of, unless you had a double click on that one, because I wanted
just a comment, because I had wanted to share something that someone had mentioned with me. That can be very difficult for some people, especially if you're still really attached to it. Like it could be something, very severe. It could be the death of somebody. Someone was literally killed in your family, right? And you don't want to forgive or let go of the pain. And it's hard to say, wow, what's the gift in my grandmother dying? Like, that's hard to answer and feel okay with what you say. And I think something you have to understand is when we say, where's the gift? Where's the good? Where's the benefit? Sometimes it's literally a lesson. While I'm not grateful that this person passed away, I'm so grateful for the time that I had with them. I'm grateful because now I actually treat my life differently and a little better, because I know I could die at any moment. That in and of itself is a really valuable lesson. So when you look at, I just want to share that because I know some people can have a hard time with that when maybe you're not feeling ready. And a great way to start is to ask yourself, where's the lesson? Where's the learning that you can use forward? And I would really encourage you, this is a key thing, seek the empowering meaning. Empowering meaning, like a disempowering meaning is a great example. Well, what I learned after my last breakup is that women suck and you can't trust any of them. That's a disempowered meaning that you're applying, because you could say that's a lesson, but is it empowering you to go forward in life? Probably not. An empowering lesson might be, man, that really did not go well. What did I learn from that? How can I get better for the next time? What was something that was a positive takeaway from that experience with that person? So that's where you can use this as a tool to support you. But I just wanted to address that because I know some people might be like, I don't want to go there, Mike. I'm not ready. And that's okay. That's okay.
I'm glad you did that, because a lot of overachievers listen to this and they're like, I already conquered that hill. I'm not going to go fucking revisit that shit. I'm not going to go peel back the past and revisit the pain. And I know you have a lot of content around this for these overachievers. You even call it this high achiever syndrome, where these people, I'm sure this is probably one of those activities that a high achiever or an overachiever might not want to go do, because, it's like, that's a waste of time. Let me just go over here and just keep working and achieving and doing some shit. I'm not going to go back to the past and revisit all that stuff. What would you say to someone, what is this high achiever syndrome? Or what would you say to someone that, maybe has a counter argument to saying like, that's a waste of time. I'm just going to keep focusing on like just getting stuff and doing stuff?
So, well, I think that the starting point, as I would ask them, is like, well, what's the point? Why are you doing any of this? Where is this leading? And I think at the end of the day, if you ask somebody the question why enough times, they'll tell you what they really want. So it's like, well, why do you want to run your own business? Because of the freedom. Well, why is freedom important to you? Because, my family, we didn't have freedom. My parents were broke all the time. Got it. So why is that important to you to not be broke all the time? Because it was, my dad worked all the time, and so he was never here. Okay, well, so why is it important to you to not be gone? Because I just want time with my kids to love them. Wow, that's super clear. So when you can get present to what is the true motivation underneath it, if most people, it's going to come down to fulfillment and happiness. Well, why do we even want to spend more time with my kids? Because I think it's going to make me happy and fulfilled. Well, if happiness and fulfillment are the finish line, gratitude is the starting line. Because if you do develop the ability to appreciate what you have, what you've been through, and who you have, you will become somebody who actually is happier, the more that you achieve. So, I mean, there's some really interesting research on this. I'm not sure if you guys have heard this, but there's a concept called hedonic adaptation. And hedonic adaptation is where we have a set point of happiness. And they did some really interesting research on this, where they took two groups of people. One was a group of people who had recently won the lottery. Okay. And the second group was a group of individuals who had recently found out that they were paralyzed, right? They lost the use of their arms, their legs, something like that. Now, they did a longitudinal study with these individuals to see who would be happier over time. And I'll just ask you guys, which group do you think wound up being happier on average over the next 10 years?
I don't want to ruin it because I know the answer. So, Andrew, do you know the answer?
I'm going to intuit that the answer is the people who are paralyzed.
The actual answer is neither.
Okay, got it.
No, and here's the reason. Because what ultimately occurred is that each group recalibrated to a baseline of happiness that they had before the experience happened. Because that's ultimately what happens, right? Especially if you're in sales or business, right? And you're like, oh man, I can't wait till I get that first year where I make $100,000. And then it's like, boom, boom, boom. Cool, you hit $100,000. Great. Well, shoot. All right, here we are. I can't wait till I make $150,000. Boom, boom, boom. I make $150,000. Oh, awesome. Well, it's just kind of like it was at $100,000, right? It's kind of like, because ultimately your habits, your routines, your rituals, your view of life has stayed exactly the same. So nothing about you is actually happier. You just have more money or more things. So and that's why, for us, why I think that the Thank You Project is so powerful. I mean, the crazy thing when I first launched it and I wrote the book is I was getting asked to speak on these really powerful entrepreneurial stages, like dudes making 7 figures, 8 figures in their businesses. And they were listening to a dude talk about thank you cards. And here's where I knew we were onto something. When I was in a room, this is a small mastermind, about 6 guys. And I just finished my keynote, my training. And one of the guys says, what was the biggest thing that you got out of the whole experience? And I said, you know what? Joy. I can't tell you that I've really truly experienced joy until after all the people that I got to love on throughout that year. And he looks at me and says, that's what I want. I don't have that. Every time I walk into a room, like I walked into here today and I saw what was out of order, what could have been better about the design of this room. I looked at some of the guys that are here and what I know they could be doing better in their lives. And I just constantly automatically come to judgment. And I want to get over that. And so, he started his own thank you project. And I think that's why. Like, why do any of this, Mike? Well, what do you want? Like, what do you really want below what you say you want on the top? Because if we are real with ourselves, we want to be happy and fulfilled. And I really, again, will reiterate, if fulfillment and happiness are the finish line, gratitude is the starting line. Because as you learn to appreciate what you have, you're just going to build that muscle over time.
Well, this is fascinating, John, and you've impacted so many people. I mean, I wish we could just go another hour, but I want to be respectful of your time. Before we, move to our big 3 questions that we always ask all of our guests, I do want to make sure we pay off the vacuum story. Okay. So I know we got a tight window here, but like, what happened? Sure. You gave your wife a vacuum and she wasn't offended. How did you manage that one?
Yeah. So, running a gifting company, we still run our gifting company. There's 4 components that are key to a well done gift. And it's the framework of time, TIME. T stands for timing. I stands for item. M stands for messaging. E stands for execution. Right? So T is timing, doing a gift when it's unexpected. Now, for me, I was leaving on multiple business trips and I knew I was going to be gone for a while. So I knew that was the perfect time to leave her a gift because I wanted her to leave feeling something good. So I timed it where I left the gift in the trunk of my car and she was driving me to the airport. And when I was at my gate, I would text her to open the trunk when she got home. So timing is key. So I bought this Roomba vacuum because she's been talking about wanting a Roomba. So I bought a Roomba. I stands for item, which is something unique they might not buy for themselves. Well, it's not cheap. My wife probably wouldn't want to go spend the money herself. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy it for her because I know that's something she's been talking about. M stands for messaging. This is the key thing, is you want the messaging to be unique and something that really expresses yourself. So I actually made this kind of a funny joke. And so I went to the Paper Source, which is a stationery store by my house, and I found a thank you card with a robot on the front. And so I opened it up and I wrote the thank you card to my wife from the vacuum's perspective. And so I wrote it as if the robot's name was Rosie, right? From the Jetsons, right? So this was Rosie, the robot, writing a thank you card to my wife. And it says, "Dear Mrs. Israel, I have been sent in service to you by your husband. I hope I can do a great job to make your life easier with all of the children. He will miss you tremendously on his trip. I look forward to spending more time together with you. Signed, Rosie." And, execution is just ultimately doing this in a timely fashion. And it's either you do it or you delegate it to a team. So I did all this myself. So we did that. And I leave the vacuum in a box. I went to Paper Source and paid $20 for someone to gangster wrap this thing. Like, it was the most beautiful wrapping ever. She probably still has the paper. And then ultimately, she posted a picture on Facebook. She's like, "Wow, like, you really outdid yourself for this one." So that was it. Fun. It's fun.
Well, I love that story, and I actually have tried to I've attempted to revisit the TIME framework in the best way possible with gifting since then. But it's definitely top of mind for me. Every time I give my wife something, I'm like, all right, shit, what would John Israel do?
You're putting all the husbands to shame over here.
Yeah, so it's super good
story. I love it though.
Well, we ask every guest 3 questions. They're short hitting, top of mind, real quick, whatever, a couple words that come to you. The first question is, what do you think the world needs most today?
So this is I'm going to steal from Daniel Kahneman, because he asked, what does the world need more than anything, or what's the biggest problem? And he said, the biggest problem with humanity is people's ability to focus on the wrong thing. And Daniel Kahneman is a world-renowned behavioral economist. And what he was talking about is how often we can take what's in front of us and make it the most important thing, which ultimately is what social media puts in front of you, what the problems are that get put in front of you. And you make them the most important thing because they're talked about the most or the loudest. And ultimately, you don't need to focus on that. You can focus on something else. So I would say that's the first thing, is people's ability to focus on the wrong thing, and focusing on what you want in life versus all the problems around you. Because at any given moment, something terrible is happening right now. And at the exact same time, something beautiful. So it depends on what you want your experience of life to be: one of misery, stress, overwhelm, or one of happiness and joy. That's my response to that.
Great answer. What 1 to 3 books would you recommend everyone check out besides Mr. Thank You Project?
Great question. I want 1 to 3 books. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Influence by Robert Cialdini. Love that book. The One Thing was really cool. I got to, that was part of the project, like finding one thing to focus on for an entire year. And fortunately, I actually got to meet the author. We both gave our TED Talks at the same event. So we got to have lunch together, and ultimately I got to be on the One Thing podcast because of that. So I think that's a great book. And then, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Her work changed my life. I was in a big transitionary period. And I've since read almost every book she's ever written, but Daring Greatly was a good one for me.
Great choices. Love them. Thank you for sharing that, John. Last question. What does it mean to you to be better than rich?
Better than rich is, loving what you got. I know we both, run our own small, coaching businesses. And I talked to a client the other day who is really, she's going through a lot right now. Marriage issues, just personal issues, financial issues. And what was so great, because we've been working together for a while, she said, what's wild is I actually have grown life is really hard around me, but I'm actually okay inside. That to me is success, because if you can be happy and fulfilled regardless of what's happening around you, that's what I think real success and being better than rich is.
Well, thank you so much, John. This has been amazing. And I'm sure that the listeners are going to want to follow up with you in some way, shape, or form. If someone wants to learn more about what you do or go deeper with you, where can they go to learn more?
For sure. So mrthankyou.com is my website, mrthankyou.com. Our big thing, you can also find me on social media. Everything is at the Mr. Thank You. We did launch our latest program, though, called the Gratitude School, which is a program that is a 6-week course to help support high-performing entrepreneurs do exactly what we're talking about. Like, how do you access positive emotions in the midst of a negative life experience? And so it's a 6-week course really teaching everything from positive mindset, mindfulness, meditation, letting go of resentment, positive relationships. There's so many powerful things in it. Love for the world to take the course. That's why we built it. So yeah, thegratitudeschool.com to watch a video of what it's about and see if it's for you.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you so much, John. This has been amazing. Listener, make sure you check that out, The Gratitude School. I think we all need more gratitude in our lives, and that's why we wanted to have John on the show. So, John, thank you so much for sharing the goods, being real, authentic, vulnerable, and also just inspiring. You're truly an inspiring person. And I was joking earlier, but I said, hey, nobody has a bigger heart than you. And before we got started, and I really do believe that. So thanks for sharing your big heart with the world. And listener, assuming this episode has helped you, it's your time to pass it along, right? Spread the good news of gratitude and joy in the world. Make sure that you share this with a friend. Also subscribe on YouTube. Check us out. Leave us a rating or review on Apple or Spotify. And remember, until next time, to leave today better than you found it. We'll see you then. Thanks. Bye.